You hear me okay, Chris?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, great to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining or allowing me to join. As people out there might know, I think it was advertised that Steve Harris would be with you today, Chris, and it's as much as I would like to be Steve, I'm not. And so I'm Leanne Dilly, though, and I'm the director of the women's ministry over at Timberline Church. And I do love to I celebrate good marriages. So I'm thrilled to do this with you today. Mhm.
Well, thank you. Yes. And it's so good to be here, like I said. And my name is Chris Bruno, and I'm a licensed professional counselor here in Fort Collins. And I run Restoration Counseling Center here in Fort Collins, and we have counselors all across the country. So one of the things that we're here to talk about is the Thrive Marriage Lab, which Timberline has really gotten behind and supports people to get into it. So we'd love to chat a little bit about that today and then also answer people's questions about marriage. So I think you have a couple questions already.
I do. I have some on the side here, and I'll jump in just a second. So, folks, if you do have a question that you want to type in, there's a chat going on. We should be able to see your question if you type it in to us under the chat. So, here we go.
Great.
And why don't we start, Chris? Why don't you just tell us a little bit more about this marriage lab and
Yeah.
what it's designed to do?
Yeah. Well, so statistically, I think most people are aware that, marriages, 50% of marriages end in divorce. And no one, when they first get married, really anticipates that happening. And so that's just 50%. But the other 50% that stay married is awesome. But usually what people end up doing is they wait about 6 years when they start to see red flags happen in their relationship. They wait 6 years to ask for help. And so what we're trying to do in the marriage lab is to help those that are really committed to have a thriving marriage stay married and also not wait that full 6 years, because by that time you're starting to get into crisis mode. And so
Yeah.
if you can attend to and continue to maintain a healthy relationship along the way, then you'll be able to have the kind of thriving marriage that you and God really always wanted for you. So that's what Thrive is about. And we're trying to fit in the space between reading a marriage book, which there's a lot of great marriage books out there. And a lot of couples will say, hey, let's read a marriage book. Most of the time, to be honest, what I've heard, at least as a counselor, is that people will pick up a marriage book and they'll read the first chapter or two with all the greatest intentions in the world. But then it will just sit on the nightstand and then other books get piled on top. Not that that's ever happened to me or you or anyone else, right? But we just forget about the marriage book, even though our intentions are great. And then on the complete other end of the spectrum is, you're in that 6 year mark, you're getting to the crisis level, you need to get into counseling. And that's, big and expensive, and it takes a lot of time and energy. And so we're trying to help people in that middle ground who want more than just a marriage book, but maybe are not right in the space where they're in the crisis of really needing to go to marriage counseling. And we have plenty of people here at Restoration Counseling who do marriage counseling. So that's not off the table. And it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or things are wrong. It just means that you need that little extra help. So Thrive is right there in the middle.
Would you be able to tell us a little bit about maybe some warning signs on that your marriage is heading towards trouble? Or is there something you see commonly for something, that kind of a question that you might want to seek help?
Yeah, well, if we just did over the last month something called the Other Loves Assessment. And so if you want to hop onto otherloves.net, you can go take this assessment. Some of the warning signs are what other parts of your life and your heart are moving away from connection with your spouse. What other loves are starting to grow in your life and in your mind and in your heart and kind of magnetizing you away from your spouse. So there's some warning signs there. I think if there's decreasing communication, if there's decreasing connection, if you're not feeling like you are as in love or as excited about your spouse as you were, last week, last year, 10 years ago, like those are some of those very subtle, I'll just settle kind of, I've heard a lot of people say, I'm just going to settle for it. This is as good as it gets as far as marriage. we've gone around this block so many times and nothing has changed. Those, when people start to settle, those are actually pretty significant warning signs that there's some unaddressed things in your relationship that really, if you want a thriving marriage, you need to address sooner
Yeah.
than later.
Okay. Good. That's I think that's going to be helpful to a lot of people. What about the pandemic? You know, we're in the middle of the pandemic here.
Oh,
What
yeah.
seems to be couples' major concerns? Is there something that's presenting itself through all this isolation and
Yo, yeah. Well, like God help us all, right? In the middle of this pandemic. And what we've said often is that the pandemic itself hasn't created more stuff. It's amplified the stuff that was already there. And so if couples are experiencing more anxiety, more frustration with each other, shorter nerves, like all of that, it's already some of the things that may have been going on in their marriage, but it's just been amplified as a result of being in lockdown and quarantine and stuck and financial stress and kids being at home from school. Like all those things just increase that level of frustration and anxiety. So that's where, you know, the pandemic itself may not have brought new things. You know, yes, it did bring you things like financial stress and loss, you know, people being sick, those kinds of things. But as far as marriage goes, I would say it's just amplified what's already been there.
yeah, yeah, and you can't really sweep anything under the rug, can you?
Well, yeah, when you're in lockdown, you can't hide. So,
Okay,
and there's
well,
not as many distractions, right? There's not as many places you can't go off to work and just let it sit and you know, or go off to school, whatever it is. You can't hide, like you said.
yeah, yeah. Um, okay, so I'm going to get to some of these questions.
Yeah.
First one is, how do I know if I'm ready for marriage?
That is a really good question. How do I know if I'm ready for marriage? Well, I don't think anyone is ever fully ready for marriage. So if you're hoping that there's going to be, you know, a red light, an orange or a yellow light, and a green light, you're hoping for that green light. You're never fully going to be ready for marriage. And so I'd like to unpack just for a second the word ready. I think readiness is not a movement of a yes or a no. It's not of I'm ready or I'm not ready. Ready is more of a posture of anticipation, a posture of a willingness to learn, a posture of compassion for the other person, recognizing that God has created them and they are broken just like you are. And so there's both glory and pain in them, just like there's glory and pain in you. And so in my mind, readiness is a posture of anticipation that God is going to use our relationship to glorify himself and sanctify both of us. So if you're in a place where you can recognize that, then I think you're ready.
I think that's awesome. And I once heard it said about that kind of infatuation love, you know, that you just head over heels and crazy, crazy stupid, actually. It's like
Yeah.
you'll get a good 9 months out of that. But if you're walking towards somebody that you respect and admire and has good values and things like that you can relate with on the level you were speaking to, it lasts forever. And
Yeah.
so thank you for that.
Well, you know, the other thing too is that, and we talk about this all the time in the Thrive Marriage Lab, and that is that every one of us has a story. And the more oriented you can both be to the story that you come from, it will help you write a marriage story together. If you're not aware of what you're coming from and the story you come from, then it will shorten that 9-month window to more like 1 or 2 months, maybe, you know. And so it's important to have. That's why I say compassion towards the story of the other person and towards your own story.
Yeah, yeah, good point. Good point. All right. It's okay to talk about sex, right?
Or yes.
If sex is getting boring, what is there something they can do to fix that?
Yeah.
Advice?
Yeah. Well, a couple things come to mind. The first is that sex is not an event. Sex is an expression. And that is kind of God's design for us, that I am offering myself in an expression of love towards my spouse and vice versa. And so If sex is getting boring, then there's something happening in the expression of love between you. And it usually means that there's lower levels of connection, emotional connection, being heard, being known, being seen, having that shared identification of your story and my story. So the problems in sex usually are not have to do with as much about sex itself as it has to do with the relationship. Now, there certainly can be some things in sex that comes up, whether it's, a past history, past abuse, some things that are being triggered, some infidelity, something like that, that will show up in the sexual encounter. That certainly is more on the about sex side of things. But that's the first thing I would say is it's an expression, and if there's something happening in sex that's less exciting or less connecting, then look behind the curtain to what's happening in the relationship. The second thing is that, I kind of view sex as like a fire in a fireplace, and that you can throw a bunch of, kindling and logs on it, but over time it is naturally going to slow down. And what that then means is that you need to tend to it, and you need to find ways to throw more fuel onto that fire, and poke it around and find some more logs and find some new and creative ways of talking about it and being together. I find couples are can we talk about sex? Even couples have a hard time talking about sex with one another. And so the more you can talk about that and have romance to be part of the relationship, then you'll kind of prevent the fire from starting to dwindle.
Yeah, well said. Good analogy too. Okay, what about, I have a question about when is it appropriate, or how do you start talking about having more kids?
Having more kids. So the assumption in that question, it sounds like that there are kids already.
Yeah.
The conversation about children in my mind is less about the children and more about the marriage. And so the number one thing that helps children be safe and secure in their family is the degree to which the marriage is solid and strong and thriving. And so if you're wanting to have more children, then the question is not about can we afford it? Do we have space in our house? Like those kinds of things. It's how are we in our marriage? Can our marriage hold what is required of us as parents to our current children, and what would it be like for us to add more to the mix? So it's less about a children conversation and more about a marriage conversation.
Okay. I just got a text on our chat, or a question for you here. Marriage while raising and adjusting to having kids. Any tips for our helpful advice? And then there's a second question. How to stay close as partners in life while trying to meet the needs of a third person?
Yes. Yeah, I laugh because I know exactly where this person is. I'll repeat something I just said. The number one thing for you to focus on is your marriage is primary, not your children. And I think that's one of the things that we often mix up is that, well, the kid comes along and their needs are here and they need to be fed and watered and bathed and schooled and all those things. We think that their needs supersede the needs of the marriage. Well, I would encourage people to refocus that so that, marriage is number one. And the two of you as husband and wife are getting the time that you need both every day and every week and every month to be regularly together, where it's just the two of you every day and, for some time, just the two of you every week. For a date night, just the two of you every month. That becomes primary for when kiddos come along and they attempt to suck all the life out of you in every way. That your marriage is always number one. And eventually the children will learn. Eventually they will learn, like, this is mom and dad time, and it's good for me that mom and dad have time.
Yeah, and it is too, isn't it? That's really true. So
yeah.
What role do you think a lot of marriages, a lot of men suffer with sexual addiction kind of issues? Is this something you'll be addressing in your marriage lab or in your counseling? Do you Does this come up a lot?
Oh, it comes up a ton, and I would even say, men and women both really struggle with various kinds of sexual addiction, and it's just only increasing. And so we do address it to a degree in the marriage lab. Yes, we also have, people at Restoration Counseling that work specifically around sexual addiction issues. I would say, sexual addiction it's not about sex.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Pornography use and any kind of unwanted sexual behavior is rooted in a story from that person's life where their emotional needs began to be met by a process, a sexual process, rather than a relational process. And so, even for those who are struggling with it personally or in your marriage, to continue to have a mind towards what has happened, not just sexually to this person, or in this person's life, but what's happened in their emotional and relational lives, that their needs somehow began to be met through a sexual process or pornography, whatever it may be. So certainly something that comes up a lot.
Yeah, yeah. Can you speak a moment about abuse too? Because it's far more than just physical abuse. So.
Yeah, well, when you say, yeah, it's far more than physical. I mean, there's a variety of abuses. And I'm not sure if that's exactly what you're asking, but there's, there is physical abuse where there's domestic violence in a marriage or in a childhood home, right? There's that physical abuse. There's emotional abuse. There's psychological abuse. There's spiritual abuse where God and the church have actually been used as weapons against us, right? There's all kinds of abuse, and abuse and trauma are ubiquitous. They are everywhere, and they're in every family to some degree because we live in a broken and fallen world. And so I'm not saying that abuse is fully active in every family, but there's some level of, I've come to know what it feels like to live in a world where brokenness and pain exist. And then that's every one of us. So whether it's full-blown abuse like we just talked about, or something with regard to what I just said, we have to be attending to that for sure.
Yeah. You're a Christian counselor.
Yeah.
And that's clear because you have brought God into this a lot. I read recently the Gallup poll says 99% of couples who pray together often out loud, their 99% of their marriages survive versus ending in divorce. So it's a sure way to protect your marriage. Is this something you teach and talk about, or?
Oh yeah, I think unifying yourselves and prayer is less to do with what we're asking God and more to do with what God is doing for us in the midst of it. And so when we can come together, as two individuals becoming one, prayer is definitely one of those places where we become one. Our wills, our hearts, our minds, sometimes even our bodies as we're holding hands. The oneness that's experienced there is a beautiful space of connection with kind of the God and husband and wife, and God and wife and God and husband, like the whole triangle gets met in that space. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, it sure is. And it's so personal and emotional. And you're inviting God in, it's a great visual. Great visual. Yes. Let's see, best book or how-to instructions on dealing with the unruling boundary violations of in-laws.
Oh, so sex, finance, in-laws, those are the top conflicts that marriages have. Best book on that. It's not trying to go through the back door a little bit, but probably the best book that I've read recently about marriage is one called How We Love. And it's not about in-laws specifically, but it's about something in the counseling world that's called attachment. In the Christian world, it's the withness of God. It is a Christian book, and they talk about how we are raised in our families of origin to develop connections with other people. And so to understand your spouse, this is a beautiful book, but then also to understand the in-laws and where they came from, it invites us to some pretty deep compassion and understanding towards your spouse's family of origin.
Yeah, you could probably put on a whole lab just about that, can't you?
Yeah, well, in the lab, we do a couple months worth of family of origin understanding and a whole month on attachment and a whole month on attunement and all those things that are deeper. The lab is not about tips and techniques. So it's about always driving below the surface into what's really going on, because, advice never really helped anybody. Deeper understanding and compassion is, Paul talks about in Romans, where it's kindness that leads us to repentance.
Yeah.
It's not information. And so we're always trying to drive to the deeper level.
Okay, so a little bit more about this Thrive Marriage Lab. Is this something that you do on an individual basis with couples, or is it in a group setting? Or
yeah, great question.
You talked about months, so it apparently
yeah.
months.
Yeah, so it is an online membership, and so a couple can join and be a part of it for 1 month, or they can be a part of it for 12 months, 24 months, however long they want to be a part of it. We have a 1-year cycle that we go through. So we start, it's starting next week, actually on Sunday. We only open for new members 1 time a year, and that starts on Sunday for 1 week, between next Sunday and Easter Sunday. And our kind of idea around that is, what a beautiful time to find resurrection in your marriage than to start in a place on Easter Sunday. So, and then for 12 months, we go through 1 month. We have a topic for each month that we will teach through and talk through. And then for each week of the month is a different thing. So the first week of the month is a gathering for all the members from all over the country to come together in a virtual gathering. And my colleague Tracy and I do a teaching. And so we will teach for about 20, 30 minutes in that space. And then we invite the couples to turn off their microphones and cameras and go into a private conversation for just the two of them about what we just talked about. And then we invite everybody to come back for a group discussion and conversation in that space. So that's the first Sunday of the month. The next Sunday, we have expert interviews. So we have experts from the authors and speakers. We've had Kurt Thompson and Dan Allender and John and Stacey Eldridge and many more who've come into the lab and speak with us. So we record a conversation with them about some of the things we kind of curate for the Thrive members. All the things you wanted to ask those experts, we try to do that for you and record that conversation for you. So you can watch that. Then the third week is a small group gathering. So some couples want a little bit more of an intimate space. And so we have a sign up, kind of first come, first serve, to sign up for a small group with just 3 couples. And we have more intimate conversation around some of their questions there. And then the fourth week, we summarize the month and the topic for that month in a PDF conversation guide that we offer couples to go back through some of the things we've taught through that month. So every week the couple gets something. It's all brand new and fresh. And if they miss the gathering or whatever, no sweat. It's all recorded. They can watch it later. They can come back to it. Or if they can't get back to it, then they can just continue on. So that's the setup. And then we have 12 months of that set forth. And we've got couples that are continuing to go back through, because where they are today is different than they were 12 months ago. And they just want to go back through and refresh and continue to pursue each other. One other thing that we offer too is something called laser coaching. And so if a couple actually wants some specific one-on-one time with either me or my colleague Tracy, we'll do a laser coaching session, which is a 30-minute session. You bring a question, and we focus on that one thing to help you get unstuck in those stuck places. And that's not recorded. So that's just private, just for you and for us to talk about. So both, groups and resources and videos and experts and small groups, and then even the opportunity for some one-on-one work as well.
Wow, that sounds great. And it sounds like it could take a good marriage and make it greater too.
Yeah.
Not just for somebody that's, struggling, or just any growth at all, it sounds like. So
yeah,
that's good.
Yeah. And we've got couples too that are pre-married, And we actually have a special kind of extra hour each month that we offer to couples that are in the pre-marriage stage, because we want to help them really get started in, on the right foot. But we have couples from that, age of marriage, pre-marriage, all the way up to like 40 years in. So
Wow.
everywhere, all across the
That's
scope.
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Well, thank you. I don't really have any other questions right now, but I just want to thank you for putting that out there because, I think we all know strong marriages are great foundations for strong, healthy children that grow up and carry forth, everything that the God intends for families. And when families stay together, they stay stronger against our enemy too. So thank you for the work that you're doing in that regard for the community.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
wish you really good luck. I want to put one plug in for Timberline Church. We do offer a class called Quest for Exceptional Love, taught by Darla Collinet. It's for those people that maybe didn't get love right the first time around for whatever reason, and are searching to see it. And often we can repeat the same mistakes, so it's kind of searching to see how you can kind of fix that, the thought process of what love is in your mind and what Christ intended it to be. So, and that's going to start April 1st. And you can register for it at Timberline's website under the Care Ministry. So
Awesome.
let's get these people going, okay, Chris?
Yeah. Sounds good. Sounds good.
Strong marriages.
I thank you too for what you're doing to help strong marriages and even the relationship that we've been able to establish. And if couples sign up for Thrive through the link with Timberline, actually there's a pretty significant discount that people can get, where it's almost 50% off each month for life if couples come through you all. So would encourage people to do that.
Thumbs up there.
Yeah, seriously.
Appreciate that.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and we'll be praying for your ministry.
Thank you. Have a
Okay.
great afternoon.
You as well. Bye-bye.
Bye.